And tonight on Joy News Prime, embattled Assin North MP James Jachikwason files a review of the Supreme Court decision that restrained him from performing parliamentary duties. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the governing NPP, John Boedu, says the party is ready for a by-election in the Assin North constituency in the central region.
It's a seat we've won severally. It's a seat we've lost twice as well. As for Assin North...
So you're preparing for a by-election?
We are ready for it. That's why we are a political party.
Also, reports of arbitrary killings, cases of cruel treatment and violence against journalists are serious issues captured in the United States Department of State Human Rights report on Ghana. We'll delve deeper into the report here on Joy News Prime. And later in the bulletin, we'll tell you why many are returning to charcoal and firewood instead of using liquefied petroleum gas.
Gas is too expensive. Now you have to pay 160 or 70 cedis. My gas is finished, so I have to use the charcoal.
At 8 p.m., I'll hand over to Charles for Prime Business. What's ahead, Charles?
Well, tonight, Ghana is under pressure to increase domestic revenue to fill the financing gap disrupted by COVID-19. We'll hear from the second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana.
IMF, for example, estimates that African governments will need to raise about $285 billion additional funding from 2021 through 2025 to effectively respond to the effects of the pandemic.
And at 8:30 p.m., we have Prime Sport. Oreku, what should we look forward to?
Ghana Football Association's General Secretary Prosper Harris-Senado has called for patience for players who would be invited for the 2023 African Cup of Nations qualifiers, which starts next month.
A player with the national team, the player has something. We should just exercise patience for them. I know with team building and everything, there are players who come and may not gel and may not play well with the national team and may fall off. But let's give them, let's embrace them as Ghanaians.
And much later here on Joy News Prime, we'll find out what CLOGSAG will do to critics who insist that neutrality allowance is unnecessary.
Again, we'll smear him with pepper in all his body parts. He get over will stop. We'll pepper him.
We are live on DSTV channel 41, GoTV 144. We are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube and the MyJoy online app. I'm Ernest Manu. Please stay for details. Of heated public and legal debate, the Supreme Court has brought closure on the matter of the voting right of a deputy speaker. The court, in a unanimous 9-0 decision, ruled that this decision that allowed a deputy speaker to vote while presiding over proceedings is valid. Private legal practitioner Justice Abdullahi, who filed the matter, had wanted the court to set aside its judgment, saying that the judges got it wrong, but the judges disagreed with him. Court correspondent Joseph Akable reports.
Mr. Abdullahi had argued the court's March 9 judgment ignored legislative antecedents of the voting history of deputy speakers in Ghana. He added that failure of the ordinary bench to consider portions of Ghana's constitution and the Parliament Act of 1965 meant the court got it wrong. Deputy Attorney General Diana Sunaba Dapa disagreed. She insisted the review threshold had not been met, a position the court upheld, dismissing the application for review. The Deputy AG is not surprised.
The review application is very strict and the grounds clearly stated, and one needs to find his case within the threshold set for a review application, that exceptional circumstances which has occasioned a grave miscarriage of justice, and there are new information that has been discovered which was not present at the time of the determination. I do not think, even without going through the review application, any argument advanced by the plaintiff on the basis that the court ought to have had regard to previous constitutions and other statutes of the Commonwealth will still have held. As you clearly heard, our constitution, which is a written one, is sui generis and ought to be interpreted in accordance with its peculiar nature. And so reference to other constitutions, even previous constitution, is no basis.
Mr. Abdullahi says the odds were up against him.
The
prior to today, I had made it clear that a review application is probably one of the most difficult things to succeed in at the Supreme Court. And so I knew the odds were against me. Indeed, some had predicted 1:100. I had predicted almost 0. Except that I still moved forward with this because, in principle, as I said, I believe that the Supreme Court is made of seasoned lawyers, and if you make strong arguments before them, they were amenable to reviewing their decisions, their previous decisions. As it turns out, they decided otherwise. And once they've decided otherwise, I think we have to move on as a nation. What I didn't want was a situation where posterity would question us.
This brings an end to the dispute over the voting rights of a deputy speaker. For Joy News from the Supreme Court, my name is Joseph Akablay.
Let's stay in the court because embattled Assin North MP James Jachikwason has filed for a review of the Supreme Court decision which granted an injunction that restrained him from performing parliamentary duties. Mr. Kwason, in this latest writ, also wants the substantive case against him at the Supreme Court thrown out. Joseph Akablay, our court correspondent, joins me via Zoom with more on this. Joseph, a lot has happened as far as this Assin North seat is concerned. But in this latest development, what are the arguments of the lawyers?
And so first, the one that is challenging the decision of the Supreme Court to restrain the Assin North MP from performing parliamentary duties. Now, the lawyers for the MP are simply asking the court to take a second look at his decision. You recall that particular decision was a 5-2 majority decision. And so with filing for a review of that decision, it will mean that 2 judges will join to make the panel a 9-member panel. Now, the expectation of the Member of Parliament is that he'll be able to convince 2 of the judges and others on the panel that made up the 7 that ruled against him to change their minds. By way of the arguments that he's advancing to urge them to change their minds, he says, number 1, that the court got it wrong in that he believes that Michael Nkoman Imfa, who is a resident of the Assin North constituency, failed to convince the court as to which right of his is at stake that the court ought to protect by way of an injunction. Okay. And that without demonstrating that, the court nonetheless proceeded to deny the people of their right to representation. And so they believe that that's a basis for the court to set aside its original decision. So that is the key argument in the first part of the argument that they advanced, and that is the application for a review of the court's injunction order that restrained him from performing parliamentary duties. Now, you recall that Mr. Michael Nkoman Imfa, even before he filed for the injunction, actually filed an application seeking the court's interpretation of portions of the 1992 Constitution.
Exactly.
Now, they are simply asking the court that if the court should interpret Article 94.2, that simply says that if you owe allegiance to another country other than Ghana, you will not be eligible to contest as a member of parliament. They say that each day that Mr. Kwason stayed in parliament, that was contrary to the constitution because at the time of filing his nomination form to contest the post, he was a Canadian citizen. Now, this is what Mr. Nkoman Imfa is asking the court to interpret. Now, the argument that have been advanced by the lawyers for Mr. Nkoman Imfa is that the Supreme Court should have been minded by the fact that this particular action is seeking the back door to enforce the High Court's judgment. That is the July 2020 judgment that stated that Mr. Jachikwason was not eligible to contest as Member of Parliament. And so on that basis, the court nullified the election and called for fresh polls to be organized. And so the lawyers are arguing that it's a judgment against the MP. And so the Supreme Court, by being invited to intervene on that same matter, is effectively dealing with an election petition, which they say is the only avenue for such an action to be challenged. And so they are urging the court that the court should not permit such a case to remain. And so it's a two-headed action that is seeking to first set aside the review motion and secondly to throw out this particular action completely.
Joseph, thank you very much for bringing us more clarity on this latest development. We know that it's been set for May 13, later this month. Joy News will definitely be in court and bring you details of court proceedings. But the General Secretary of the governing NPP, John Boadu, says the party is ready for a by-election in the Assin North constituency in the central region. In a PM Express interview to be aired later tonight, John Boadu said the NPP is already preparing for a by-election.
There are a lot of issues in court that can take 3 years, can take 4 years. What is the essence of having somebody who is not legitimate rep of a constituent? You understand? So for me, as for Assin North,
so you're preparing for a by-election?
We are ready for it. That's why we are a political party. We are ready for it, and we believe that when the decision is made, we are ready to contest.
You will win that seat?
It's a seat we've won severally. It's a seat we've lost twice as well. So it is still open.
Okay.
Now, reports of arbitrary killings, cases of cruel treatment and violence against journalists have been highlighted as significant human rights issues in Ghana. Now, this according to the latest country report on human rights practices released by the United States Department of State. The report, which also stated that government took steps to address some of these reported abuses by its officials, however, concluded impunity remains a major problem as far as human rights is concerned. Kofi Ejay of our research desk joins me in the studio with more on this. Kofi Ejay, let's first go through what the report talks about as far as abuse against or violence against journalists is concerned. What does it say?
All right, so Ernest, if you should move to the next slide, which talks about abuse of journalists. If you could move to the next slide for me. Okay. So we have, arrest of journalists, and we have, in 2020, this year, so we have Oheneba Boama Benin. He was dragged to the High Court by the Attorney General after he alleged in a Facebook video that President Nana Akufo-Addo had met 8 Supreme Court judges to influence their decision in the 2020 election petition. And now, if you should look at what happened to him, you realize that he was charged with contempt of court and then also imprisoned for 14 days plus a fine of 3,000 cedis in addition, Ernest. Okay. So if you should move to the next person, where we have Mensa Thompson. He published on Facebook that a claim alleging that President Akufo-Addo relative used the presidential jet on a shopping spree in the United Kingdom. Okay. Now let's look at what happened to Mensa Thompson. He was charged
and let's just say Mensa Thompson is not a journalist, but exactly. the assault on journalists was also linked to issues of press freedom.
Absolutely.
Issues of freedom of speech.
Yeah. So he publication of false news, that was discharged, and then offensive conduct, he was granted bail, a sum of 50,000 Ghana cedis. And we have arrest of Bobi Ansah. He accused the First Lady, Mrs. Rebecca Akufo-Addo, and the Second Lady, Mrs. Samira Bawumia, of giving themselves state lands at the AU building. Now let's look at what's happened to him. He was also charged with publication of false news and offensive conduct, and then he was granted bail of the same thing, 50,000 Ghana cedis, and then case adjourned to March. That was last year, this year. And we've also, if you look at this, we should group all of them together. We have 2 of the cases being false news and offensive conduct. Okay. In terms of contempt of court, we just had 1 case, and if you should look at treason felony, we have 1 case being, Oliver Baka Vomawo.
All right, Kofi, stay with me. We have Suleiman Brima, who is the executive director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, joining us via Zoom with his reaction to this. Mr. Brima, I'm grateful for your time here on Joy News Prime. These are issues that I'm sure you're very familiar with. Disappointed that, this has found its way in the U.S. State Department report, and of course its consequences on the image of the country.
Well, certainly this is something that is done every year, and we, of course, knew that the U.S. State Department would issue its annual statement on the state of human rights in our country. And of course, we are all aware of the developments that have happened. Some of us have had cause for concern and have expressed our concern over the year. And well, it's quite a damning report, not good for the image of a country like Ghana that has touted its credentials in terms of human rights, press freedom, media freedom, and all of that. But it's not surprising. I think given the developments that have happened, this report accurately reflects what has been happening over the period.
And I mean, seeing the extent at which this has gotten to, what are we hoping? What would you expect government to do as far as these reports are concerned?
Well, I think it is important that the government of the day begins to move away from a state of denial. We report these incidents whenever they happen. The government, through its communications machinery, would always come out to deny and create the impression that those of us who are monitoring and reporting these incidents are deliberately trying to paint the country in a bad light. I think the way to go is to accept that these things are happening. Sometimes these are not sanctioned by government. And I should say quite often, these violations are not sanctioned by government. But when the government often adopts the posture of denying whatever has happened, well, government is not doing that. In fact, to a point where the president himself at some point said that, look, what happened to Ahmed Swale shouldn't be considered a press freedom incident. And it took a lot of advocacy to get him to reverse that. And last year, then he started making promises that the Swale incident is going to be investigated and so on and so forth. So we need to accept that these things are happening and confront them in dealing with them, because the government of the day has the primary responsibility of securing all of us and making sure that the context within which we work is good and human rights are respected as guaranteed by our constitution.
How would you rate government's commitment to these issues of human rights abuses, especially in our space? I mean, media and press freedom.
Well, I think it's been more of rhetoric. We hear a lot of, interventions by way of words rather than actions. So far, apart from the passage of the Right to Information law and a few interventions here and there, I think that previous governments have had a better record when it comes to, issues of press freedom and free speech. Unfortunately, we have a president that, we all touted his credentials in terms of his positions on human rights and so on and so forth. But I'm sorry to say that President Akufo-Addo, if things continue the way we are seeing, may perhaps end up being the worst in terms of the human rights record. And I'm talking about post-military regime. Even the Rawlings era, as a military, officer who transitioned into a democratically elected leader, I think that there was some sort of evidence to prove that, look, they are living up to the constitutional provisions of freedoms and so on and so forth. President Kufuor's time, yes, things happened, but we saw gradual improvement. President Mills, I think at some point he himself even calls journalists to apologize for incidents that happened. Under Mahama, there were incidents. We took on Standogwe and all of that. But I think that the level of commitment was far better than what we are witnessing today. And like I'm saying, if care is not taken, we may have a very worst case scenario under President Akufo-Addo.
Mr. Brahma, I'm grateful for your time. That's the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa. And I must say that the report also captured the verbal assault on my own colleague, Erastus Donko. The Assin Central MP Kennedy Japan had said that he should be attacked following the incident that happened in the Ashanti region in Nigeria, his coverage of that riot by the residents there. Now, we still have some more on the report for you. Kofi is still with me in the studio. Kofi, there are issues of unlawful killings that is captured in the report. What are the details?
So you look at number one being the Face the Country movement, where Ibrahim Kaka Mohammed was murdered in Nigeria in the Ashanti region. Yeah. And remember that in the wake of the protests, 2 other people were also shot with respect to this issue. Then the report also captured the 2020 election, where 8 persons were killed during the 2020 elections. And then if I may read this to you, you realize that the report says that 8 killings were associated to the 2020 election, with at least 2 killed by the National Election Security Task Force, and then composed of military and police units. And we also had at least 2 deaths from civilian, violence. And as you also mentioned, there were, cases of David Tamaklo, who was arrested, an online news editor, in April 2021. And then in May, actually, there was a detention of Caleb Kuda of City FM, and then Kennedy Japan, what you just mentioned, calling for Erastus Asaridon Court.
And I must say that so far we've heard nothing from the police as far as this is concerned, because we made an official complaint. The Privileges Committee also was expected to take up this matter following a report made by the concern raised by Al-Hassan Suhaini. Exactly. And so far nothing has happened.
And Erastus himself gave an account on Newsnight, and then he is also saying that,
no one has reached out to him.
Exactly. And there were also comments on corruption, that, the Free SHS Secretariat had wasted, misspent over 3.16 million cedis. And then, so Ernest, that's what the report.
Kofi, thank you very much for always bringing us the details in these reports. Let's do some other stories here on Joy News Prime. The Civil and Local Government Staff Association of Ghana has been justifying its demand for neutrality allowance. At a news conference earlier today, the group insists it will continue with its strike until government fulfills its promise to pay them all arrears owed. Isaac Bampoado is the Executive Secretary of CLOGSAG.
You see, the neutrality allowance, by the name does not justify the allowance. The name neutrality allowance is not justified by the name. The justification for any allowance is done at the negotiation table. It's not done in the media. It's done at the negotiation table. That's where we do justification for whatever allowance. And that's according to the labor laws of Ghana. We went to negotiations. The government team was led by the master strategist of the government, Honorable Osafo Mafu, with his personal assistants. We had Finance Ministry there, represented by Abina, the Deputy Minister of Finance, with his technical people. Fair Wages and Salaries Commission were there. They brought two lawyers plus their technical team. Employment was there. And of course, CLOGSAG was there, led by my good self. Now, so if you people are saying that we have outwitted and played the fast one on them, it's negotiation. Then we should be congratulated for doing a good job. Because that's what negotiation is all about. And mind you, this neutrality allowance is only a minute part of our broader conditions of service. There are more goodies that we've already finished about 80%. We don't do double work. We're going to justify at the negotiating table and then some people are asking questions. We don't do double work. Me, I don't do double work. If you want to do double work, you can go and do double work. But we don't do double work. We've justified whatever allowances that we've been given at the negotiating table.
CLOGSAG also accused the Trades Union Congress of acting in bad faith. The reason they will not march alongside them on Sunday, May 1.
Besides harping on the economic challenges in Ghana, the TUC General Secretary veered into raising salaries to reflect inflation rates. He made the following remarks: if we speak and the government and employers do not hear us, then we will do what unions do. We hardly embark on strike because it is a very difficult thing to do. It is like war. So before we declare war, we have to make sure we have a good reason. Finally, he added that, and this is the time, we have to change this. This is a time we must ensure that we just don't talk, but that they listen and hear. If the government pretends not to hear us because it pretends to be sleeping, then we should do what unions do. The civil and local governments of Ghana would wish to stake unequivocally that it was not party to such decision and disassociates itself from such threats. It must be emphasized that CLOGSAG is a registered union and has the right to bargain for its constituents on its own terms. In reality, this has been the focus of CLOGSAG in channeling its activities and the common good of its members. To some, the threat of nationwide strike by the TUC contradicts the 1st March 2020 Kwao Declaration, when some of the sections of the community stated, as referred, the 14, improve coordination between Fair Wages and Salaries Commission and the Ministry of Finance and all other relevant agencies to determine clearly annual wage baskets allowed for negotiations. This means that there's a limit to the quantum of money for negotiations, and this will be determined by the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission and then the Ministry of Finance. The declaration was signed by the TUC on the blind side of other unions. The TUC is throwing dust into the eyes of workers.
The Executive Secretary of CLOGSAG, Isaac Bampoado, also disagreed with critics who insist the neutrality allowance is unnecessary. Here's what they'll do.
Up again, we'll smear him with pepper in all his body parts. Oba will stop. Oba will stop.
That's a threat to his life.
I say Oba will stop.
No, but if you say you inject
Oba will stop. Oba injected. No, you can take it. It's talking. He's also talking. Whatever spirit you can give it. Okay? You can Oba will stop. We'll pepper him.
Away from labor issues, let's do something on health. And the Ghana Health Service is advising that countries or communities stay away from the use of insecticide. We'll bring you details of that and more after this break here on Joy News Prime. Stay with us. Hello again, thanks for staying with us here on Joy News Prime. Now, politicization and manipulation of the judiciary to favor the political class are major setbacks to democratic governance in Africa. These are the observations of former UN Special Representative of the Secretary General, Dr. Mohammed Ibn Chambers, at a high-level stakeholders engagement on electoral violence in Africa. According to him, the phenomenon does not only threaten democracy, but also leads to military takeovers and political instability. Dr. Ibn Chambers was speaking at the West African Network for Peace-Building High-Level Stakeholder Engagement on electoral violence in Africa. Samuel Mbura has more.
Between 2023 and 2025, the West African region will witness at least 60 elections. These include 6 presidential, 6 legislative, and 4 general elections. Among the countries expected to conduct these elections are Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Guinea, Niger, and Cote d'Ivoire. All these countries have had a history of various electoral violence in recent years. Specifically, Benin and Senegal are also experiencing tendencies of term elongation or non-inclusive process ahead of the elections. Dr. Ibn Chambers holds the view the political class is responsible for all infractions and warns against further manipulations which will disrupt a relatively stable political environment.
Research has shown that Africa is one of the most socially and economically unequal regions. The concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few, coupled with a growing population of unemployed youth, prepares the ground for citizen mobilization that could turn violent. Over the past decade, insecurity in the region has increased because of operations of violent extremist groups such as Boko Haram, ISIS in West Africa, and organized crime across the Sahel. We all know the situation in the Sahel. Public trust is fundamental for a credible electoral process. A recent Afrobarometer survey from 18 African countries, including 8 West African countries, indicated that while the majority of Africans accept elections, they perceive the announcement of results from the last elections in their countries as inaccurate. A context characterized by social and economic inequality breeds distrust and dissatisfaction, which poses a challenge to the conduct of fair elections.
Dr. Ibn Chambers believes reformation of electoral processes and inclusion of the youth in governance processes could check political violence.
To prevent further truncation of the democratic trajectory, Parliament should take steps to bridge the political divide to restore reform processes for the establishment of strong legal and institutional frameworks for democratic elections and governance. The youthful population in our region is one of the opportunities for rebuilding towards democratization. But as you know, the youth is a double-edged sword. We have to harness the youth for good purpose, because if we don't, it can also be the instruments to be used for violence and disruption of the process.
Director of Elections at the Electoral Commission of Ghana, Dr. Sribo Kweko, says the public mistrust for electoral management bodies is orchestrated by stakeholders involved in the election process. He called for collective efforts to address the challenge.
I would say it is the stakeholders. Though they themselves will tap your back when they win. When they lose, it's a different ballgame. So the issue is the stakeholders themselves should tell the people what they know and appreciate. Because, like I said, we have moved since '92 to this date. So if we are still doubting the processes, then when are we going to believe in the system? So to me personally, I don't think that we are not doing well. We are doing well, but people should appreciate that this is how the system works, and they should follow how the system works.
What is the Electoral Commission of Ghana doing to ensure that you build public trust in your activities?
It's an issue of about continuous education and engagement. So we continue to engage people, we continue to improve on our education. I think that's what we can do.
With funding support from the European Union, the West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, implemented the Electoral Violence Monitoring, Analysis and Mitigation Project in 2021. It is partnering the Economic Commission for West African States and ANIS on a regional workshop to share lessons learned from that project. Samuel Mbura's report for Joy News, Accra.
The upsurge in the price of liquefied petroleum gas, that's LPG, has led to an increase in demand for charcoal as an alternative for cooking. The continuous campaign against deforestation and the free distribution of gas cylinders reduced the preference for charcoal as a source of cooking fuel in households. Prince Opia, however, reports that people are returning to the use of charcoal and wood fuel.
Madam Gifty is about to cook. She's opting to use charcoal because she can't afford to fill her gas cylinder. According to her, a bag of charcoal is cheaper and lasts longer than the gas.
So the bidena na ko say gas is here we for filling is here when you are 1.6 1.7 what even filling bidena so dey meto double akusi one man na metin use more than.
The gas is too expensive. Now you have to pay 160 or 70 cedis, and it doesn't last.
Ukraine, you see the gas no boy a dia my cemento. You see Ophelia so now
the rise and instability in the prices of LPG is a worry to consumers.
My gas is finished, so I have to use the charcoal.
The Forestry Commission says the surge in the demand for charcoal is a clear depletion of the vegetation cover. Augustine Kofi Jedu is the Ashanti Regional Manager.
Those who are illegally burning charcoal here and there, we want to caution them that it's not every tree that is supposed to be cut to burn charcoal. Yes, so they need to obtain permit from the nearest forest office before they do that. A lot of families, households have turned to charcoal production, and that one is also affecting the environment.
So in 2015, government distributed 50,000 free cylinders to rural communities in Ghana. It was part of government policy to increase access to LPG in these areas. But the rising cost of LPG in recent times is affecting the demand.
A bag of charcoal used to be 30 cedis, but it's now 40 cedis. So we also sell the bag at 45 cedis. Due to the price increase, we no longer sell it at 1 cedis.
According to the Forestry Commission, people are cutting down trees that are not meant for charcoal. To safeguard the forest, the Commission is distributing plants that can be used for commercial charcoal production.
So what Forestry Commission is doing now is to levy those trucks that carry charcoal. We have checkpoints at various locations, and we charge 80 pesos per mini bag of charcoal. So we count the number of bags in the truck, and then you pay something to the state. Apart from that, Forestry Commission mobilize those monies, and then they give it to us to raise nurseries. So as we talk now here in the Ashanti region, we have such nurseries that we supply free seedlings to people to plant to protect the environment. So we want to urge charcoal producers to come together as a group or as groups in the various localities. Go to the nearest forestry office, we'll give you the seedlings free of charge to go and plant, so that when they mature, and they are very fast growing as well, when they mature you can harvest them, and then they will copy, you go and harvest again. If you do it in a large scale, you can even export if you so wish.
It is a growing concern that the rising demand for charcoal for cooking in recent times will pose a great danger to our already stressed forest. My name is Prince Apia, reporting from Kumasi.
The Ghana Health Service is advising against the use of insecticide-treated nets for fencing farms and carting goods in tricycles other than its actual use in fighting malaria. The Directorate is worried about the continuous disregard for the proper use of the insecticide-treated net. Amanse South Health Director Dr. Ofosu Kwabi admonished the locals to desist from the practice. He was speaking at the World Malaria Day celebration at the Amanse South District in the Ashanti region.
The occupation of the people in the Amanse enclave are mainly farming and mining. The Ghana Health Service observes fencing farms with treated net to ward off intruders by the people keeps rising. Dr. Ofosu Kwabi is District Health Director for Amanse South. He says the Directorate, in partnership with Asanko Mines and German firm GIZ, are deepening awareness to reverse the trend. He was addressing a mini debate to mark the World Malaria Day under the theme Advance Equity, Build Resilience, End Malaria.
the net that we are giving, it is obvious that when they take the net, some people don't use the net. You find some people who use it to fence their gardens. Even some use it to cover their load from the farm. So the net we are distributing, but as to the usage is a problem.
So now you have the platform. What are you saying about it?
We encourage the people, in as much as they take the net, they have to use it, and it will help.
Over 2,000 pupils within the Amancia South District received free insecticide-treated nets to combat malaria. Ahmed Mohadini Yahya is acting general manager for Asanko Gold Ghana.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is Asanko doing this year, 2022? This year, 60 health workers from the district and various parts of our communities participated in a refresher program. In addition, Asanko Mine is supplying 2,000 nets of insecticide-treated nets to all pupils in Amancia South District. And this will be facilitated by the District Education Directorate by way of distribution to all pupils within this catchment district.
Now, technical advisor at GIZ Health Development Program, Mary Bonsu, called for concerted effort to increase awareness. The move was spearheaded by Asanko Gold Ghana in partnership with GIZ.
There are multiple channels by which malaria impedes development, and this includes effects on fertility, population growth, saving and investment, worker productivity, absenteeism, premature mortality, and medical cost. Pandemic management can never be treated in isolation or in silos. It must consider comorbidities or underlying health conditions such as malaria, HIV, tuberculosis, and blood pressure.
You're watching Johnny's Prime with me, Ernest Manu. Time now for the latest in showbiz. After this break, please stay. Thanks for staying with us. Now time for the latest in showbiz. An artist manager and entertainment pundit, Mr. Logic, says the push by Sarkodie for the insurance or the issuance of diplomatic passport to musicians is in bad taste. The rapper Sarkodie, who was part of a selected few Ghanaian artists flown to France as part of the Accra in Paris celebration, said it was necessary for such courtesies to be extended to them because they inadvertently represent the country on various platforms around the world. But Mr. Logic disagrees. He spoke on Daybreak Hits on Hits FM.
Others smoke and one can hear because Sak is a very intelligent artist. Charlie, some of these requests, oh yeah, now I research. Sak ni three did too much. I can say I'm sounding, I'm trying to bash or Charlie. This is not my regular self. Yeah, you threw me out, Charlie. See, what's the meaning of diplomatic passport? This is a document that's issued by government to send you on official purposes, like governmental purposes. Will Sarkodie allow himself to be regulated by government as to what he sings, what he projects, and how he dresses? Will he allow himself? Will he allow? Yeah, and certainly be a can. Yeah, when we say them into the air, we are not saying that he did not think of it, but I'm saying that yeah, such statement. I'm in pessimistic. In pessimistic statement. Sarkodie na kasa me shame dida. In pessimistic statement. We are message some of these statements we shouldn't make them. I said we are doing too much. When you ask for diplomatic passport, then you are telling me that you are ready to be regulated by government, by state. If it's ready to be regulated, told how to dress, how to sing, the content of his song, where to be at what time, then I would say he needs it. Because you are a commercial artist. Government don't decide what you sing and what you sell.
You understand? And Sarkodie, what he should be asking for is visa waivers. Where can Sarkodie go? So ucha America, ucha UK, nyaka nyina Canada, ucha America, ucha Canada, ucha Canada, ucha America. So I don't know. Maybe I know or person on the Emirates for business because maybe there's an oil investment you want to do that he needs some level of treatment and some courtesies and some protocols, because I don't see what Sarkodie will do with diplomatic passport. He has basically gone beyond visa.
Well, rapper Kwesi Athahu just released his Son of Jacob album. In an interview with Andy Dusty, also on Daybreak Hits on Hits FM, says he only features on songs he's moved by. It's not just about the money. Listen.
What does it take to get Kwesi Athahu on the track? If one wants to feature you.
Oh, if I fulfill him, yeah, that's it. All the songs, all the features I've done, like I felt it. Nobody paid me for feature yet.
Really?
Yeah, but I have to feel it.
Is it a personal decision or they don't?
Well, it's a personal decision to feel it first before I do it. Yeah, it's a personal decision to feel it first. Because usually people, they try to give you money, they be like, oh, do this, but we don't move like that. Yeah.
But do you sign split sheets like, okay,
yes.
Okay. Oh, then that's cool. Then you are taking your money somehow.
But I for take money, then we for do splits too.
Hey!
Yeah.
Really?
People do that.
Really?
Yes, people do it. Like you go pay 200K, then you go still do splits. You go give
200,000 cedis. $200,000 for a feature.
Not for me.
No, I'm talking about other artists, right? That's what you're saying.
Oh yeah, people do, like you pay for the feature fee, then you still give them splits. Yes.
Yes,
it's happening.
If you create beats, for example, you purchase the beats.
Yeah.
And you give
splits. Yeah. But why?
Yeah, so I'll be Ejuma Nosane.
So now you've been trying to get him and it's not been successful. This is why. That's it. That's our show for tonight. Many thanks for your company. You can log on to myjohnline.com. You find more stories there. I'm Ernest Manu.